She called the wrong number. When someone was beating her mom. A Hell's Angel answered. Rusty's grip tightened on his phone. The little voice on the other end sounded so small, so afraid. His first instinct was to hang up. Other people's problems weren't his business. But something in the girl's voice cut through his usual defenses. "Kid," he said, keeping his voice low and steady, "are you safe right now?" A tiny sniffle came through the line. "I'm hiding in my closet. He's so mad at Mommy." Rusty set down his wrench. The garage around him suddenly felt too quiet. The stark contrast to whatever chaos was unfolding on the other end of this call. Oil-stained rags and motorcycle parts lay scattered across his workbench. The half-empty bottle of whiskey sat untouched. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked, standing up slowly. "Nia," she whispered. "I'm 5. 5 years old. Christ." Rusty ran a hand through his graying hair. "I'm Rusty." He kept his voice gentle, fighting against the roughness that years of smoking had etched into it. "Nia, is there another grown-up in your house who can help?" "No, just me and Mommy. And him." Her voice dropped even lower at the last word. In the background, Rusty could hear the muffled sounds of shouting, something breaking. A woman's voice pleading. "Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today." Now, back to the story. "I was trying to call my Nana May," Nia explained, her words tumbling out in a frightened rush. "She always helps when I'm scared. But I think I got the numbers mixed up." Rusty felt something inside him shift. Something that had been dormant for longer than he cared to remember. For 25 years, he'd worked hard to not feel much of anything at all. The leather vest hanging on the hook near his workbench, marked with the patches and insignia that kept most people at a safe distance, had been his armor. But this little girl's voice slipped right past all his defenses. "Where do you live, Nia?" He was already reaching for his keys. "In the blue building by the big store," she answered vaguely. "With the broken swing set." Not enough to go on. Rusty took a deep breath. "Is there a window in your room? Can you see any street signs?" More crying in the background. A crash. The sound of a woman sobbing. "He's hurting her bad," Nia whispered, her voice catching. "Please help us." "I will, kid. I promise." The words surprised him, even as they left his mouth. "Listen, Nia, I need to figure out where you are. Is there mail nearby? Something with your address." A rustling sound came through the phone as Nia seemed to be moving. "Mommy keeps letters on the fridge," she said. Her breathing was fast and shallow. "But I'm scared to go out there." "Stay hidden," Rusty said quickly. "Don't come out of your hiding spot." He paced across the concrete floor of his garage, mind racing. He could call the cops, but they'd want an address. And something told him this kid needed more than just a generic 911 response. "Nia, does your mommy have a name? What does she call herself?" "Mommy," Nia answered, then seemed to understand. "But other people call her Alana. Alana Johnson." Rusty grabbed a pen, scribbling the name on the back of an old receipt. With a name, he could find an address. He knew people who could help with that. "Good job, Nia," he said, trying to sound encouraging. "You're being really brave." A loud bang came through the phone, followed by a scream that made Rusty's blood run cold. "He's kicking the door," Nia whispered, panic rising in her voice. "I think he's looking for me." "Stay on the phone with me, Nia," Rusty said, his voice firm but gentle. "Don't hang up, no matter what." He was already moving, grabbing his leather vest and keys. 20 years ago, he would have ridden straight into this situation with nothing but rage and fists. But he wasn't that man anymore. Or at least, he was trying not to be. "I'm coming to help," he told her, starting his motorcycle with a low rumble. "Just hold on." "Listen to me carefully, Nia." Rusty's voice softened to a gentle rumble. The coldness that usually lived in his chest had melted away, replaced by a fierce protectiveness he hadn't felt in decades. "Are you hidden somewhere safe?" "In my closet," she whispered between quiet sobs. "Behind my winter coat." "Good girl. That's real smart." Rusty lowered himself onto a wooden crate beside his workbench. His knees cracked as he sat down. "Can that man hear you talking to me?" "No." Her voice was barely audible. "He's in the living room with Mommy." Rusty ran a hand over his weathered face. The garage around him was silent, except for the soft ticking of his wall clock and the faint sound of traffic outside. This was real. A child was hiding while someone beat her mother just a phone call away. "I'm going to help you, Nia, but I need you to be very brave." He kept his voice steady, fighting back the anger building inside him. "Can you tell me your full name?" "Nia Johnson," she said softly. "And how old are you, Nia?" "5. A pause. "Almost 6 next month." Rusty nodded, though she couldn't see him. 5 is plenty brave. He reached for his other phone, an ancient flip phone he kept for calls he didn't want traced. "What's your mommy's name?" "Alana," Nia whispered. "Alana Johnson." "You're doing great, honey." Rusty typed the name into his second phone, sending a text message to Viper, an old friend who worked in the phone company. "Do you know your address? Where you live?" The line was quiet for a moment, filled only with Nia's shaky breathing and distant shouting. "We live in the blue apartments," she finally said, "by the big park with the broken swing." It wasn't much, but it was something. Rusty added this detail to his message. His flip phone buzzed almost immediately. "Nia, I want you to stay very quiet in that closet," he instructed while reading Viper's response. "If you hear that man coming, don't talk to me, okay? Just hold the phone." "Okay." Her voice trembled. "Are you going to help my mommy?" "Yes," Rusty promised without hesitation. "I'm going to help both of you." Through the phone, he heard another crash, followed by a woman's muffled cry. Rusty's jaw tightened as his second phone buzzed again. Viper had narrowed it down to 2 possible locations, both apartment complexes, with blue exterior paint, near parks in the east side of town. "Nia, is there a big grocery store near your apartment? Or a gas station?" "The Food Giant," she answered. "Mommy takes me there for ice cream sometimes." Rusty quickly texted this new information to Viper. That narrowed it down to Blue Ridge Apartments on Mason Street. He knew the area, a working-class neighborhood that had seen better days. "You're being so brave, Nia," Rusty said, standing up and grabbing his leather vest from its hook. The worn leather felt heavy as he slipped it on, patches and insignia gleaming dully in the garage light. "I want you to keep hiding, and keep talking to me if you can." "Are you coming here?" Hope mingled with fear in her small voice. "I'm coming right now." Rusty grabbed his helmet and keys. "And I'm going to stay on this phone until I get there and make sure you're safe." The sound of breaking glass came through the line, followed by a woman's desperate plea. Nia's breathing quickened. "He's so mad," she whispered. "I'm scared." "I know you are, honey, but I'm on my way." Rusty walked his motorcycle out of the garage into the cool night air. "I promise I won't hang up, not even for a second." He swung his leg over his bike, the familiar rumble beneath him as the engine roared to life. The stars above were hidden by city lights, but Rusty felt more clarity than he had in years. "I can hear your motorcycle," Nia said, a hint of wonder in her frightened voice. "That's right." Rusty pulled out onto the empty street. "And I'll be there soon. Just stay hidden, stay quiet, and know that help is coming." With the phone secured inside his helmet, Rusty accelerated toward the east side of town, a man with purpose for the first time in decades. The night air cut across Rusty's face as he weaved through traffic, the rumble of his motorcycle vibrating through his bones. The city lights blurred into streaks as he pushed the bike faster, cutting down side streets he knew would get him to the east side quicker. All the while, Nia's frightened breathing filled his helmet. "You still with me, honey?" he asked, his voice gentle, despite the wind rushing around him. "Yes," came the small reply. "He's throwing things again." Rusty's grip tightened on the handlebars. "What's he throwing, Nia?" "Mommy's pictures. The ones in frames." Her voice caught. "I can hear them breaking." The rage inside Rusty bubbled up, hot and familiar. It was an old friend. That anger. The kind that had gotten him into more fights than he could count. That had left men bleeding on bar floors and in parking lots. The kind that had once made his name feared in 3 counties. "It's okay, sweetheart. I'm getting closer," he promised, running a red light and cutting between 2 cars that honked angrily at him. He ignored them. Nothing mattered except the tiny voice in his ear. From the other end of the line came a woman's cry, sharp and pained, followed by a man's voice shouting words too slurred for Rusty to make out clearly. "He's hurting her," Nia whispered, her voice breaking. "He's calling her bad names." Rusty felt his heartbeat in his throat. His first instinct was simple. Find this man, put him down hard, make sure he never got up to hurt anyone again. It was what he knew. Violence answered with greater violence. The math of survival he'd learned as a boy and perfected as a man. But there was a child involved. A little girl hiding in a closet who didn't need to see more violence tonight. Rusty did something then that surprised even himself. At the next red light, he pulled over and pressed the emergency call button on his phone. 911, what's your emergency?" A calm female voice answered. "There's a woman being beaten at Maple Gardens Apartments," Rusty said, keeping his voice steady. "East side of town, near Food Giant. I don't have the exact unit number, but it's on the 2nd or 3rd floor. I can hear the assault happening now." "Sir, how do you know this is occurring?" The dispatcher's voice was professional but cautious. "The woman's daughter called me by accident. She's 5 years old and hiding in a closet while her mother gets beaten." Rusty swallowed hard. "I can still hear it happening. Is the child in danger as well?" "Not yet. She's hidden, but who knows how long before he finds her." Rusty checked the cross street. "I'm 3 minutes away. Police need to get there now." After providing what details he could, Rusty ended the call with dispatch and focused back on Nia. "You doing okay in there?" he asked gently. A long silence answered him. Too long. "Nia?" His voice sharpened with worry. "It got quiet," she finally whispered. "I don't hear Mommy anymore." The silence was worse than the shouting. Rusty knew that from his own childhood, when the yelling stopped, but the danger hadn't. When his own father would fall into those terrible quiet rages that left marks no one would see at school. Rusty gunned the engine, weaving recklessly through traffic. "Tell me about your room, Nia," he said, trying to distract her from the frightening silence. "What color are your walls?" "Purple," she answered softly, "with butterfly stickers." "That sounds real pretty," he said, his mind flashing to a different time. A little boy's room with model airplanes hanging from the ceiling, the ones his mother had helped him build before she left. Before everything went wrong. Rusty shook away the memory. That was then. This was now. And right now, he was all Nia had. The apartment complex finally came into view. A faded blue 3-story building with peeling paint and a sad playground beside it. Rusty pulled into the parking lot, just as distant sirens began to wail. "Nia, I'm here," he said, killing the engine and looking up at the rows of windows. "And I hear police coming too. Help is here, honey." "Are you coming up to get me?" Her voice trembled with hope. Rusty took a deep breath. "The police will come up. I need you to stay hidden until they find you, okay? Don't come out for anyone except a police officer." "But I'm scared," she whispered. "I know you are, baby girl, but you've been so brave already. Just a little longer now." Rusty watched as blue and red lights flashed at the end of the street. "Stay quiet in that closet. Help is finally here." Rusty stood in the parking lot, one hand still holding the phone to his ear, the other clenched in a tight fist at his side. The approaching sirens grew louder, until two police cruisers screeched into the lot, lights painting everything in flashes of red and blue. "The police are here now, Nia," Rusty said quietly. "They're going to come help you and your mom." "Don't hang up," she pleaded, her voice small and frightened. "I won't, honey. I promise." Rusty watched as four officers jumped out of their cars, hands hovering near their weapons as they approached the building entrance. One officer, a woman with her hair pulled back in a tight bun, spotted Rusty and broke away from the group. "Are you the caller?" she asked, her eyes taking in his leather cut with the Hells Angels patches. "I'm still on with the kid," Rusty replied, nodding toward the building. "Second floor, apartment facing the parking lot. Man inside is hurting the mother. The girl's hiding in a closet in her bedroom." The officer gave a curt nod and rejoined her colleagues. They disappeared into the building, moving with practiced urgency. Rusty paced beside his motorcycle, unable to stand still while Nia's frightened breathing filled his ear. He wanted to charge up those stairs himself, to handle this the old way. But something kept him rooted to the spot. Maybe the fear in Nia's voice, or maybe something inside himself he'd thought long dead. "They're knocking on doors," Nia whispered suddenly. "I can hear them in the hallway." "That's good, honey," Rusty said. "That's the police. When they knock on your door, you let them know where you are, okay?" "Okay." Her voice trembled. I think he's yelling at them now." Rusty's gaze shot up to the second-floor windows. He could hear muffled shouting, then the unmistakable sound of a door being forced open. More shouting, a woman crying out. Then a man's angry voice that sent a chill down Rusty's spine. It couldn't be. "Police are in the apartment now," Nia whispered. "They're telling him to get on the ground." "That's good, honey. You stay put until they find you, all right?" Rusty's voice sounded far away to his own ears, as that familiar shouting continued from above. Minutes stretched like hours. Finally, Nia's voice changed. "Someone's opening the closet door," she whispered. "It's okay," Rusty assured her. "That's the police coming to help you." The line went quiet. Then Rusty heard a woman's voice in the background saying gentle words to Nia. Relief washed over him as he realized she'd been found safe. The apartment door opened, and two officers emerged, escorting a woman with a bruised face and trembling hands. Alana Johnson looked small under the harsh lights, one arm wrapped protectively around her middle, dark hair falling across her face. An officer guided her toward the stairs. Next came another officer, her hand resting protectively on Nia's shoulder as she led the little girl out. Nia clutched a worn stuffed rabbit, her eyes wide and searching. Finally, two more officers appeared, struggling with a handcuffed man who was still putting up a fight despite the restraints. They dragged him toward the stairs, his feet stumbling on the steps. When they reached the parking lot, the flashing lights illuminated the man's face, and Rusty felt his world tilt sideways. Derek, his brother, 20 years older, face ravaged by hard living, but unmistakably the same person. The boy who'd once followed him everywhere, the teenager who'd tried to copy his every move, the young man who'd screamed that he never wanted to see Rusty again after that final brutal fight. Derek was being pushed toward a police car when he looked up and locked eyes with Rusty. Recognition dawned instantly, followed by a hatred so pure it seemed to light up the night. "You!" Derek spat, struggling against the officers. "You called the cops on me? Your own brother?" Rusty stood frozen, unable to form words as 20 years of buried history crashed over him like a wave. Before he could respond, movement caught his eye. Nia had spotted him from where she stood with the female officer. Her face lit up with recognition, and before anyone could stop her, she broke free and ran straight toward Rusty. "You came!" she cried, colliding with his legs and wrapping her small arms around him. "You really came!" Rusty's hands hovered awkwardly before settling gently on her shoulders. He couldn't look away from Derek, who glared at him with pure venom, as officers shoved him into the back of the police car. Across the parking lot, Alana looked up at the commotion. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene. Her daughter clinging to a leather-clad biker, the same man who had somehow answered her child's desperate call. Her mouth opened slightly in shock, her gaze moving between Rusty, Nia, and the man being locked in the police car. In that moment, with his brother's hateful stare burning into him and this child's arms wrapped trustingly around his legs, Rusty felt 20 years of carefully constructed walls begin to crack. The fluorescent lights of Mercy General's emergency room buzzed overhead, casting everyone in a sickly, pale glow. Rusty shifted uncomfortably in the molded plastic chair, his leather cut and tattoos drawing sidelong glances from other patients waiting to be seen. Beside him, Nia sat with her small legs dangling, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "I'm hungry," she whispered, looking up at him with those big brown eyes that had somehow pulled him across town and into this mess. Rusty cleared his throat. Let me see what I can find." He stood up, relieved to have something to do. "You stay right here, okay? Don't move." Nia nodded solemnly, and Rusty walked to the vending machines lined against the far wall. He fished in his pocket for crumpled bills, smoothing them against his thigh before feeding them into the machine. The crackers and juice he selected dropped with a thunk. When he returned, Nia was exactly where he'd left her. She accepted the orange juice box with both hands, struggling with the tiny straw, until Rusty took it back, punctured the foil, and handed it to her again. "Thank you," she said quietly, taking a sip. "Is my mommy going to be okay?" Rusty rubbed his palms against his jeans. "Yeah, kid. Doctors are good at fixing people up." A woman in a dark blue pantsuit approached them, clipboard in hand, and a wary expression on her face. "Mr. Callahan?" she asked, eyeing his patches. "That's me. I'm Ms. Richards from Child Protective Services." She glanced meaningfully at Nia. "Could I speak with you for a moment?" Rusty started to stand, but Nia's small hand shot out and grabbed his. "Don't go," she said, panic rising in her voice. "Just over there," Rusty said, pointing to some chairs only 10 feet away. "You can see me the whole time." Nia reluctantly let go, and Rusty followed the social worker to the chairs. "Mr. Callahan, I'm trying to understand your relationship to this family," Ms. Richards said, pen poised above her clipboard. "There isn't one," Rusty replied flatly. "The kid called me by accident. She was trying to reach her grandmother." Ms. Richards raised an eyebrow. "And you just happened to show up at the scene?" "Well, and stayed on the phone with her until I figured out where she was." Rusty's jaw tightened. "Called 911. Waited outside." "I see." The social worker made a note. "And you're aware the man arrested was your brother?" Rusty's face hardened. "Found that out when they dragged him outside." "So you had no prior knowledge of Derek Callahan's relationship with Ms. Johnson?" "None." He glanced over at Nia, who was watching them intently while sipping her juice. "Look, I'm just the guy who answered the phone. That's it." Ms. Richards studied him. "The child seems quite attached to you." "Kids are weird," Rusty muttered, uncomfortable under her scrutiny. "Mr. Callahan, in cases like these, we need to be very careful about—" "Rusty?" Nia's small voice interrupted them. She'd walked over, still holding her rabbit and juice box. "When's my mommy coming back?" Before either adult could answer, a nurse in blue scrubs appeared. "Are you with Alana Johnson?" she asked Rusty. He hesitated. "Sort of. I'm watching her kid while she's being checked out." "Ms. Johnson is ready to be discharged," the nurse said. "If you'd like to come with me, you can see her now." Rusty stood, and Nia immediately slipped her tiny hand into his calloused one. Ms. Richards followed as they walked through sliding doors into the treatment area. Alana sat on the edge of a hospital bed, her face pale beneath the bruising. A bandage covered her split lip, and she held her ribs carefully as she tried to put on her jacket. "Mommy!" Nia broke away from Rusty and ran to her mother, stopping just short of hugging her when Alana winced. "Hi, baby," Alana said softly, stroking her daughter's hair. "I'm okay." The doctor, a tired-looking man in his 50s, stepped into the curtained area. "Ms. Johnson, I've prescribed some pain medication." He handed her a slip of paper. "You've got bruised ribs that will take several weeks to heal, and I'd like you to follow up with your regular doctor in a week." Alana nodded, looking overwhelmed. "Is there someone who can stay with you tonight?" the nurse asked. "You shouldn't be alone, especially with your injuries." Before Alana could answer, Nia pointed at Rusty. "He can! Rusty can stay with us!" An uncomfortable silence fell over the curtained area. Ms. Richards shifted her clipboard, the doctor raised his eyebrows, and the nurse looked between Alana and Rusty with obvious confusion. Alana's eyes met Rusty's, wary, exhausted, and uncertain. In them, he saw the terrible weight of the choice before her. Trust this stranger who had somehow saved them, or face the night alone, injured and afraid. The borrowed pickup truck rumbled through empty streets as midnight stretched toward morning. Rusty gripped the steering wheel with both hands, stealing glances in the rear-view mirror at his unexpected passengers. Alana sat rigid in the back seat beside Nia, her body angled protectively toward her daughter, despite the pain each movement caused. Her eyes constantly scanned the road behind them, as though expecting Derek to somehow appear. "It's just another 10 minutes, Rusty said, his voice rough in the quiet cab. "House isn't much, but it's safe." Alana nodded, without speaking. Her fingers traced the edges of the hospital discharge papers crumpled in her lap. Beside her, Nia's eyelids drooped heavily. The little girl fought to stay awake, her head bobbing with each bump in the road before she surrendered and leaned against her seatbelt. Her small hand remained wrapped around her mother's wrist. Rusty cleared his throat. "There's a pharmacy that's open all night where we can get your prescriptions filled in the morning." "Thank you," Alana whispered, the first words she'd spoken directly to him since leaving the hospital. The truck turned onto a narrow street, lined with modest bungalows. Most windows were dark at this hour, with only the occasional porch light glowing. Rusty pulled into the driveway of a small house set back from the road. The yard was neat, but spare, just grass and a single oak tree. "We're here," he announced, killing the engine. Nia stirred, blinking sleepily. "Is this your castle?" Despite everything, a small smile flickered across Alana's bruised face. "Not exactly, kid," Rusty said. He climbed out and opened the back door for them. Inside, the house was simple but clean. A worn leather sofa faced an old television. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with paperbacks and motorcycle manuals. There were no photographs anywhere. "Spare rooms down here," Rusty said, leading them down a short hallway. He pushed open a door to reveal a small bedroom with a double bed covered in a faded blue quilt. "Bathroom's right across. Towels in the closet there." Alana stood in the doorway, clutching her torn blouse closed where buttons had been ripped away during the struggle with Derek. Rusty noticed and disappeared for a moment, returning with a folded gray t-shirt. "My mom's," he said awkwardly, holding it out. "She passed a while back, but I kept some things. It's clean." Alana accepted it with careful fingers. "Thank you," she said again, her voice stronger now. "I'll be in the living room if you need anything," Rusty said, backing away. "The chair reclines. I'll sleep there." Alana's shoulders relaxed slightly at this assurance that he would keep his distance. "Nia, let's get you washed up and ready for bed," she said, guiding her daughter toward the bathroom. Rusty returned to the living room and sank onto the edge of the sofa. He rubbed his face with both hands, wondering how his quiet night-fixing motorcycles had led to this. The muffled sounds of running water and soft voices drifted from the bathroom. 20 minutes later, Alana emerged wearing his mother's shirt, which hung past her knees. Her face was scrubbed clean, making the bruises stand out more starkly against her brown skin. Nia trailed behind her, swimming in one of Rusty's old t-shirts that reached her ankles like a nightgown. "Everything okay?" Rusty asked, standing up. Alana nodded. "We'll be fine." Thank you for—" Her voice trailed off, as though she couldn't find words for all that had happened. "Get some rest," Rusty said gruffly. "Lock the door if you want." He watched as they retreated to the spare room, the door closing with a soft click. After a moment, he went to the kitchen, filled a glass with water, and found an old nightlight in a drawer. He placed both items quietly outside their door before turning to go. Behind him, the door opened a crack. Nia's small face appeared in the narrow space, her eyes heavy with sleep, but still watchful. "Good night, Rusty," she whispered. Something shifted inside Rusty's chest, a feeling he couldn't name. He stood frozen in the hallway as the little girl who had trusted him with her fear now trusted him with her safety. "Night, kid," he managed to say. The door closed again, and Rusty remained in the darkened hallway, startled by how deeply those two simple words had reached inside him, touching a part he 500 thought long dead. Dawn crept through the kitchen blinds, painting golden stripes across Rusty's worn linoleum floor. He stood at the stove in the same clothes from yesterday, spatula in hand, fighting with a piece of bread stuck in the ancient toaster. The coffee maker gurgled beside him, filling the small kitchen with its strong aroma. Behind him, small bare feet padded across the floor. Rusty turned to see Nia, her hair mussed from sleep, Rusty's oversized t-shirt hanging to her ankles. Without hesitation, she climbed onto a chair at the kitchen table, as though she'd been doing it for years. "Morning," she said, rubbing her eyes. Rusty nodded, uncertain how to interact with a child in the daylight. "You want some juice?" "Yes, please." She folded her hands on the table, watching him with solemn eyes. He poured orange juice into a chipped mug, the only thing close to kid-appropriate in his cabinets, and placed it carefully in front of her. The toast popped up, burned around the edges. "Sorry about the toast," he muttered, scraping it with a butter knife. "Not much of a cook." "That's okay," Nia said, sipping her juice. "Mommy burns toast too." A floorboard creaked in the hallway. Alana appeared in the doorway, wearing yesterday's clothes. She'd washed the blood from her split lip, but bruises had darkened overnight around her eye and jaw. She moved stiffly, one arm pressed against her ribs. "Good morning," she said, her voice carrying a wariness that hadn't been there when she spoke to her daughter. "Coffee?" Rusty offered, already reaching for a mug. "Please." Alana lowered herself into a chair beside Nia, wincing slightly. For a few minutes, they ate in awkward silence. Rusty placed butter and a nearly empty jar of strawberry jam on the table. Nia concentrated on spreading jam to every corner of her toast. Alana sipped her coffee, watching Rusty over the rim of her mug. "The police will need statements," Alana finally said. "About last night." Rusty nodded. "Yeah. They'll want to know how you found us." "I'll tell them the truth. Your girl called. I traced it. I called 911. Alana set down her mug. "That man, the one they arrested, Derek," Rusty said, his voice flat. "He knew you," Alana continued. "And you knew him." The kitchen fell silent. Even Nia stopped eating, looking between the adults. Rusty pushed his plate away and leaned forward, forearms on the table. "He's my brother," he said simply. Alana stiffened. Her hand moved protectively to Nia's shoulder. "We haven't spoken in 20 years, Rusty continued. "I didn't know he was with you. I swear it." "You expect me to believe that?" Alana's voice sharpened. "I don't expect anything." Rusty met her gaze directly. "But it's the truth. I didn't know where he was or what he was doing. Didn't want to know." "But now that you do." Alana hesitated. "What happens now?" Rusty understood her fear. A biker choosing his brother over strangers would be expected. Loyalty above all else. "Calling the police was the right thing," he said firmly. "What Derek did was evil. Plain evil. And I don't protect evil, not even from my blood." Alana studied his face, searching for deceit. Finding none, her shoulders relaxed slightly. "We need to go back to the apartment," she said. "Get some clothes, Nia's comfort blanket. Talk to the police. They're probably still processing the scene." Rusty said. One can't stay in these clothes another day, Alana replied. She glanced down at Naya. And we need her medications from the bathroom cabinet. Rusty nodded. I'll drive you. You've done enough, Alana started, but Rusty shook his head. I'm already involved, he said quietly, and you shouldn't be alone when you see that place again. Alana looked like she might argue, but instead she exhaled slowly. Thank you. Rusty stood and carried their plates to the sink. I'll grab my keys. 20 minutes later, they were ready. Nia wore the same clothes from yesterday, her hair now neatly combed. Alana had borrowed a flannel shirt from Rusty's closet to replace her torn blouse. It hung huge on her frame, but she'd rolled the sleeves and tied the front. Rusty held the front door open. Outside, the morning air was sharp and clean, carrying the promise of a warmer afternoon. His truck sat waiting in the driveway, a steel chariot for their reluctant return. Alana paused at the threshold, her hand tight around Nia's. She looked up at Rusty, really seeing him for the first time, not as a biker or a rescuer or even Derek's brother, but as a man standing steady in the middle of a storm not of his making. Ready? He asked. Alana nodded once, decisive. Together, they stepped into the cold morning light, bound now by a conflict none of them could avoid. Mid-morning sunlight streamed through the apartment windows at Maple Gardens, illuminating dust particles floating in the air. Rusty's truck pulled into a visitor space, the engine rumbling to silence. He glanced in the rearview mirror at Alana's face, tight with anxiety, before turning to Nia in the back seat. You okay, little one? He asked. Nia nodded solemnly, clutching a small stuffed rabbit Rusty had found in his closet. It had belonged to someone long ago, but he couldn't remember who. Yellow police tape crisscrossed the apartment door, now partially removed. An officer stood nearby, clipboard in hand, speaking with a woman in a navy blazer. When they approached, the officer nodded in recognition. Ms. Johnson, he said, the scene's been cleared. You can collect your belongings now. Alana squeezed Nia's hand. Thank you, Officer Reynolds. The woman in the blazer stepped forward. I'm Tricia Wilson, victim advocate with the county. I'd like to talk with you about your options moving forward. Rusty hung back as they approached the door. Want me to wait outside? He asked. No, Alana said quickly. Please come in. The apartment door swung open, revealing chaos inside. The coffee table lay overturned. One leg splintered. Glass from a shattered lamp crunched underfoot. A bookshelf leaned precariously against the wall, most of its contents scattered across the carpet. Red wine stained the beige carpet like blood. Nia pressed herself against Rusty's leg. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Let's start in your room, Alana suggested to Nia, trying to shield her from the worst of the living room damage. As they moved down the hallway, the closet door hung ajar. The bottom hinge cracked where someone had kicked it. Rusty felt Nia tense beside him, recognizing her hiding place from the night before. I'll grab some boxes from my truck, Rusty said, needing a moment of fresh air. Outside, he leaned against the truck, drawing deep breaths. The sunlight seemed too cheerful for the heaviness in his chest. When he returned with flattened moving boxes, the advocate was sitting with Alana at the kitchen table, paperwork spread before them. The emergency protective order is temporary, Tricia explained. You'll need to attend the hearing for the permanent order. There's a women's shelter with security, if you need somewhere to stay. Rusty began assembling boxes, trying to look busy while eavesdropping. What about the rent here? Alana asked. I've paid through the month. Given the circumstances, management might release you from the lease early, Tricia said. I can help with that paperwork, too. Rusty moved to Nia's room, where the little girl sat on her bed, carefully selecting which toys to take. The room was small but neat, with crayon drawings taped to the walls and books stacked on a child-sized table. Which ones are your favorites? Rusty asked, kneeling beside her. This one, Nia said, holding up a worn teddy bear. And my books about stars. We'll take those for sure, he agreed, holding the box open. Later, while Nia stayed with Trisha, Rusty helped Alana gather clothes and essentials. He noticed how she moved carefully around her bedroom, avoiding looking at the bed where the sheets were rumpled and a pillow lay torn. In the bathroom, prescription bottles lined a small shelf. Insulin for Nia, he realized. The kitchen revealed more about their lives. The refrigerator held only a half-gallon of milk, some eggs, and condiments. The cabinet contained a single box of cereal and some pasta. End of month tight, Rusty recognized. He'd lived it himself. When Alana wasn't looking, he slipped the medications into a separate bag, making sure they wouldn't be forgotten. After 2 hours, they had packed what mattered most: clothes, medications, important documents, and Nia's comfort items. The officer provided information about Derek's initial hearing and bail conditions. Trisha left pamphlets about support services and her business card. As they prepared to leave, Nia stood in the living room doorway, staring at the destruction. Her small voice broke the silence. "Do we have to sleep here tonight?" The question hung in the air. Alana looked at the broken furniture, the stained carpet, the shattered glass, all evidence of violence that had existed long before last night. Rusty didn't hesitate. "No, not tonight," he said firmly. Alana's eyes met his, exhaustion written across her face. She gave a slight nod, accepting his answer without argument. The relief in her shoulders was visible. A weight momentarily lifted. They carried the boxes to Rusty's truck in silence, closing the door on the broken apartment without looking back. The automatic doors of Save Mart slid open with a gentle hiss. Rusty paused at the entrance, his broad shoulders seeming too large for the cheerful discount store, with its bright signs and squeaky clean floors. His leather cut with the Hells Angels patches stood out against the pastel displays of summer merchandise and family-friendly advertisements. Alana stepped through beside him, her bruised face partially hidden behind a curtain of dark hair. She kept Nia close, one hand protectively on her daughter's shoulder. "We don't need much," Alana said softly. "Just the basics." Rusty nodded, grabbing a red plastic shopping basket. "Take what you need. Don't worry about the cost." The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as they navigated the toiletries aisle. Rusty seemed uncomfortable, like a wolf in a petting zoo. His eyes constantly scanned exits and corners, old habits from a different life. "Can I pick my own toothbrush?" Nia asked, her small voice breaking through the tension. Alana hesitated, calculating invisible numbers in her head. "Sure thing," Rusty answered before Alana could object. "Which one you want?" Nia's face brightened as she examined the colorful children's toothbrushes. She selected one with a bright pink handle and glitter in the plastic. "This one." "Good choice," Rusty said, his rough voice gentle. They moved through the store methodically. Deodorant, shampoo, a hairbrush, pain relievers for Alana's ribs. At the clothing section, Rusty stepped back, giving them privacy while Alana selected necessary items. Underwear, socks, a couple of simple t-shirts. An elderly woman pushing a cart gave Rusty a suspicious glance, her eyes narrowing at his tattoos and leather. She clutched her purse tighter and steered her cart to another aisle. Rusty noticed but kept his face impassive, used to such reactions. "That man was scared of you," Nia observed, watching the woman retreat. "Some people judge before they know," Rusty replied simply. Nia considered this, then announced loudly enough for nearby shoppers to hear, "But you saved us. You're our hero." The simple declaration hung in the air. Rusty's weathered face flushed slightly as he pretended to study a display of work socks. "Let's get some food," he suggested, changing the subject. In the grocery section, Rusty grabbed essentials while Alana selected items with careful consideration: bread, eggs, peanut butter, apples, pasta. Things that stretched. Things that filled hungry stomachs. At the pharmacy counter, Rusty quietly arranged for Nia's insulin prescription to be transferred and refilled, paying without comment when Alana was distracted in another aisle. "You didn't have to do that," Alana said later when she realized what he'd done. "I know," Rusty replied simply. At checkout, Rusty pulled out a worn leather wallet and counted out bills. Alana watched, her pride battling necessity. When the cashier announced the total, she flinched slightly. "I'll pay you back," she whispered. Rusty shook his head. "No expectations. Just helping." The cashier, a young woman with purple-streaked hair, smiled at Nia. "What a nice grandpa you have." Before Alana could correct her, Nia answered, "He's not my grandpa. He's Rusty. He helped when the bad man hurt my mom." The cashier's eyes widened slightly, darting between Alana's bruised face and Rusty's stoic expression. Her smile softened with understanding. "Well, I'm glad he was there for you." "Me too," Nia said, slipping her small hand into Rusty's calloused one. Back at Rusty's house, plastic bags covered the kitchen counter. Afternoon sunlight slanted through the windows as they unpacked the groceries. Nia carefully arranged her new toothbrush, small hairbrush, and bunny-shaped soap on the bathroom counter, while Rusty stored food in cabinets that had been half-empty for years. Alana sank into a kitchen chair, exhaustion finally catching up to her. The adrenaline that had carried her through the hospital, the police station, the apartment, and the store was fading, leaving her hollow and aching. Rusty moved around the kitchen with surprising efficiency, pulling out a pot and filling it with water. "Pasta okay for dinner? Nothing fancy, but it'll fill you up." "That sounds perfect," Alana said. She watched him work, this stranger who had stepped into their lives through a wrong number. The house smelled of tomato sauce and garlic as Rusty stirred the pot, occasionally checking on Nia, who was coloring at the small kitchen table. The ordinary domesticity of the scene washed over Alana, the gentle bubbling of boiling water, the rhythmic chopping of Rusty cutting vegetables, Nia humming softly to herself. For the first time since last night, Alana felt her shoulders relax. The doors were locked. Nia was safe. They had food and medicine and clean clothes. The immediate crisis had passed, leaving space to breathe. Rusty set a glass of water in front of her, along with the pain medication they'd bought. His movements were careful, deliberate, as if trying not to startle her. Alana took the pills gratefully, feeling the first fragile hint that safety might be possible. Steam rose from 3 mismatched plates as Rusty set them on the kitchen table. The pasta wasn't fancy, spaghetti with jarred sauce and some added vegetables, but it smelled delicious. Nia climbed onto her chair, eyes wide with hunger. Alana sat gingerly, mindful of her bruised ribs. "It's not restaurant quality," Rusty said gruffly, placing a bowl of grated cheese in the center. "But it'll do." "It looks wonderful," Alana said softly. She twirled pasta onto her fork, taking a small bite. "Thank you." They ate in silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the occasional scrape of forks against plates and Nia's small slurps as she attempted to wrangle long strands of spaghetti. "Do you ride your motorcycle every day?" Nia asked suddenly, sauce dotting her chin. Rusty looked up, surprised by the question. "Most days, yeah, unless it's raining hard." "Is it super fast?" A hint of pride crossed his face. "Fast enough. Been working on that engine for years." "Can I see it up close tomorrow?" Nia's eyes shone with curiosity. "If your mom says it's okay." Rusty glanced at Alana, deferring to her authority. "Please, Mom," Nia pleaded. Alana nodded. "Just looking, though, no riding." Nia beamed, then tilted her head, studying Rusty with the unfiltered honesty of childhood. "Are you scary all the time? Or just to bad people?" The question hung in the air. Rusty set down his fork, considering his answer carefully. "I guess I look scary to most folks," he admitted. "Don't mean to be. It's just how I turned out." "You didn't seem scary on the phone," Naya said matter-of-factly. You sounded nice. A soft, unexpected laugh escaped Rusty, the sound rusty like his name, as if long unused. Well, that's good to know. Alana smiled then, a real smile that reached her tired eyes. She's right. Most people wouldn't have stayed on the line like you did. Rusty shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. Anyone would have. No, Alana said firmly. They wouldn't have. After dinner, Naya settled on the living room floor with crayons and paper Rusty had found in a drawer. The adults sat at the kitchen table with mugs of coffee, the dishes cleaned and put away. I should tell you about Derek, Rusty said finally, his voice low so Nia couldn't hear. About us, growing up. Alana nodded, waiting. Our dad was mean. Drunk most nights, violent when crossed. Rusty's fingers tightened around his mug. Used his fists to solve problems. Our mom tried to shield us, but she couldn't always. Alana's eyes showed understanding, rather than pity. Derek was younger, smaller. I tried to protect him when I could. Rusty stared into his coffee. Left home at 16, joined the club by 18. Thought I was escaping, becoming something different. But you weren't, Alana guessed softly. No, just traded one kind of violence for another. Rusty's jaw tightened. Derek followed me a few years later, wanting in with the club. But he was unstable, cruel sometimes. Started using. I couldn't watch him destroy himself. What happened between you two? Bad night, really bad. Rusty's voice grew quieter. He hurt someone who didn't deserve it. I stopped him. Things got ugly. We haven't spoken in 15 years. The weight of unspoken details hung between them. I'm sorry, Alana said simply. Seeing him last night. Rusty shook his head. Never imagined it would be like that. They sat in silence for a moment before Alana spoke. I ignored the warning signs with Derek, she admitted. The jealousy, the drinking. Told myself it wasn't that bad. Her fingers traced the edge of her mug. I was scared of doing this alone, raising Nia, making ends meet. Wanted to believe he could change. Not your fault, Rusty said firmly. Part of it is, Alana countered. I knew better, but I was so tired of struggling. They talked until the kitchen grew dark, sharing pieces of their separate journeys that had somehow intersected through a child's misdialed phone call. Later, as the clock ticked past 9, Nia's head began to droop over her coloring book. Without comment, Rusty stood and gently lifted her into his arms. She instinctively curled against his chest, half asleep already. This way, Alana whispered, leading him to the spare room. Rusty carried Nia with surprising tenderness, his movements careful as he laid her on the bed. Alana pulled the covers up, brushing hair from her daughter's forehead. In the hallway, she turned to Rusty. Thank you, she said quietly. Not just for tonight. For everything. It's nothing, he said, looking away. It's not nothing. Alana's voice was steady. You didn't have to do any of this. You could have hung up that phone. You could have left us at the hospital. She met his eyes directly. Thank you for not making us feel like a burden. Rusty nodded once, unable to find words for the unfamiliar warmth spreading through his chest. Morning light filtered through Rusty's kitchen windows as he stood at the stove, flipping pancakes. He'd been up since dawn, restlessness driving him from the couch where he'd slept. The routine of cooking centered him, gave his hands something purposeful to do. Something smells good, Alana said, entering the kitchen. Her hair was damp from the shower, and she'd dressed in one of the new outfits from yesterday's shopping trip. Just pancakes, nothing special. Rusty slid a golden stack onto a plate. Thought the kid might like them. As if summoned by the mention, Nia appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Her pink pajamas were rumpled, teddy bear clutched under one arm. Pancakes! She exclaimed, climbing onto a chair. School day, Rusty said, setting a plate before her. Figured you'd need to get there on time. Alana looked up sharply. School. I hadn't even thought. That's why I got us up early, Rusty said. Kids need routine, especially after. He trailed off, not wanting to mention the events that had brought them here in front of Nia. You're right, Alana agreed, reaching for her coffee. I should let her teacher know what's happening. And make sure they know who can pick her up, Rusty added. Who can't? Understanding passed between them. Derek. 40 minutes later, Rusty's pickup truck pulled into Oakwood Elementary's circular drive. The morning drop-off was in full swing. Kids with colorful backpacks, parents in work clothes hurrying through goodbyes. Rusty shifted uncomfortably in the driver's seat. I'll wait here while you two go in. No, Nia protested from the back seat. I want you to come with us, Rusty. Please. Alana glanced between her daughter and Rusty. It might be good to introduce you to her teacher, so they know who you are. Rusty nodded once, then killed the engine. He felt conspicuously out of place among the parents in business casual attire. His worn jeans, heavy boots, and leather jacket marked him as different, despite leaving his cut at home. You okay? Alana asked as they walked toward the building. Not exactly my usual scene, he admitted, removing his baseball cap as they entered the school. The front office was busy with morning activity. A secretary looked up, her eyes widening slightly at Rusty's tattooed forearms before focusing on Alana. I need to speak with Mrs. Green, please, Alana said, and update some information about my daughter. While Alana filled out paperwork restricting Derek's access, Rusty stood by the wall, hat in hand, acutely aware of curious glances from passing parents. Some stared openly with suspicion. Others nodded politely, recognizing the protective stance he maintained near Nia. A gentle-faced woman with silver-streaked hair approached them. Mrs. Johnson, I'm Mrs. Green, Nia's teacher. Thank you for seeing us, Alana said. We've had a situation at home. Mrs. Green nodded, her eyes kind but professional. Let's step into my classroom to talk. The children will be arriving soon. Nia took Rusty's large hand in her small one, tugging him along. Come see my desk, Rusty. The kindergarten classroom was bright with primary colors, alphabet letters lining the walls and tiny chairs around clustered tables. Rusty ducked his head instinctively, feeling too large for this space designed for small bodies. While Nia proudly showed him her cubby and artwork, Alana spoke quietly with Mrs. Green, explaining the protective order and custody restrictions. Nia, why don't you help me water the plants before the bell rings? Mrs. Green suggested, giving Alana and Rusty a moment. As Nia skipped to the windowsill with a small watering can, Mrs. Green approached Rusty. Thank you, she said simply, for looking out for them. Rusty shifted his weight. Just doing what needed doing. That's exactly what matters. Her smile held no judgment, only genuine appreciation. Nia needs stable adults in her life right now. The morning bell rang, and children began filing into the classroom. Nia ran back to Rusty, wrapping her arms around his legs. Will you pick me up later? She asked, eyes hopeful. If your mom says it's okay, Rusty answered, looking to Alana. We'll both come, Alana promised, kneeling to hug her daughter. Be good today, honey. Rusty and Alana walked out as other parents said their goodbyes. He noticed how a few mothers pulled their children closer as he passed, but also how an older father with military bearing gave him a respectful nod. Back in the truck, Rusty turned to Alana. Where to next? The diner, she replied. I need to talk to my boss about some time off. As they pulled away from the school, silence filled the cab. Alana stared out the passenger window, her fingers nervously working the strap of her purse. I'm terrified, she admitted suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. What if Derek makes bail? What happens in court? I can barely pay rent as it is, and now we're not even staying at the apartment. Rusty kept his eyes on the road, giving her space to voice her fears. What if he comes looking for us? For Nia? Her voice caught. I don't know how to do any of this. Rusty's hands tightened on the steering wheel. We'll figure it out, he said finally. One day at a time. We? Yeah. Rusty nodded, certainty in his voice. We. The neon open sign buzzed against the window as Rusty held the diner door for Alana. Sunlight caught the bruise beneath her eye, making her wince and touch it self-consciously. The smell of coffee, bacon, and pancakes filled the air as they stepped inside. Good Lord, honey, what happened to you? A stout woman with silver-streaked hair rushed from behind the counter, dish towel still in hand. Bernice, I'm okay, Alana said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. It's been a rough couple days. Bernice Williams pulled Alana into a gentle hug, mindful of her injuries, then stepped back to examine her face. Her eyes flicked to Rusty, standing awkwardly by the door in his worn leather jacket. And who's this? Bernice asked, her tone protective, but not unkind. This is Rusty, Alana explained. He helped us. Derek? Her voice caught. That no good. Bernice stopped herself, glancing around the half-full diner. Come to my office, both of you. She led them past the counter, through the kitchen where short-order cooks nodded respectfully to Alana, and into a small back office crammed with scheduling binders and framed photos. Sit, Bernice commanded, pointing to 2 chairs. She closed the door and settled behind her desk. Now, tell me everything. Alana explained what had happened with Derek, how Nia had called Rusty by accident, and how they'd been staying at his place while sorting things out. As she spoke, Bernice's expression softened, her gaze moving between Alana and Rusty. That's why I came by, Alana finished. I need some time off until things settle. I know it's short notice. Hush, Bernice interrupted. Your shifts are covered. Take the week at least. She scribbled something on a notepad. And here's an advance on your next paycheck. Bernice, I can't. You absolutely can. We've been through worse together, haven't we? Rusty watched the exchange quietly, sensing a history between them. The walls of Bernice's office told part of the story. Photos of staff gatherings with Alana present in many, dating back several years. Always trying to carry the world alone, Bernice said, shaking her head at Alana. Been that way since you started here. Remember when you were late that morning because you just had to help some poor soul behind the diner? Alana looked confused. Which time? That rainy morning must be 3-4 years back now. You came in soaking wet because you gave your umbrella to that rough-looking fella, bought him breakfast, and gave him bus money, if I recall. Rusty went very still, his throat tightening. Said he reminded you of someone, Bernice continued, arranging papers on her desk. Had those same sad eyes. I remember now, Alana said softly. He was sitting against the wall in the rain. Hadn't eaten in days, he said. Rusty stared at the floor, his mind racing back through time. The cold rain, the hunger pangs after days of drinking instead of eating, the beating he'd taken from rivals that had left him bloody and alone, and the young woman who'd appeared with a breakfast sandwich, coffee, and enough kindness to crack his armor. It was Alana, the same woman sitting beside him now, her daughter sleeping safely in his spare room. You always did have a habit of collecting broken people, Bernice said fondly. Always seeing worth where others don't bother looking. Rusty swallowed hard, fighting the urge to speak. To tell Alana that he was that man, defeated, drunk, and desperate, who she'd helped without judgment or expectation, that her small act of mercy had been the turning point that day, keeping him from reaching for his gun. But he said nothing. She didn't need that burden now, didn't need to feel tied to him through obligation or coincidence. Your job is here whenever you're ready, Bernice assured Alana, rising from her chair. She turned to Rusty, her eyes sharp, but not unkind. You look after her, you hear me? She spends too much time looking after everyone else. Yes, ma'am, Rusty answered, his voice rougher than usual. Outside the diner, Alana checked her watch. We have a couple hours before Naya's school lets out. Rusty nodded, opening the truck door for her, carrying the weight of their unknown connection like stones in his pocket. He would tell her someday, but not now. Not when she needed his strength more than his gratitude. Ready to pick up Nia? He asked as he started the engine. Yes, Alana said, settling into the passenger seat. Let's go get our girl. The courthouse annex loomed gray and imposing against the blue afternoon sky. Rusty pulled into the parking lot and cut the engine, glancing at Alana in the passenger seat. You ready? He asked quietly. Alana took a deep breath and nodded, though her hands fidgeted with the folder of paperwork in her lap. In the back seat, Nia hugged her stuffed rabbit close. It's just more talking, right, Mommy? Nia asked. That's right, baby. Just more talking with some nice people who want to help us. Alana's voice was steady despite the worry in her eyes. They walked toward the entrance, Nia between them. When they reached the security checkpoint, Rusty removed his wallet and keys, placing them in the plastic bin. The guard eyed his leather cut suspiciously. Sir, are you involved in this case? The guard asked. He's with us, Alana said firmly, before Rusty could answer. Inside, the hallway stretched long and institutional, with numbered doors and the squeak of sensible shoes on linoleum. They found the victim services office at the end of the corridor. A woman with kind eyes and practical clothes introduced herself as Ms. Martinez, the victim advocate. We'll need to complete several forms, she explained, leading them to a small conference room. The temporary protective order can be processed today, but there will be a hearing scheduled within the next 2 weeks. Nia climbed into a chair at the table, pulling crayons and paper from her backpack. Rusty settled against the wall near the door, giving Alana space while staying close enough if she needed him. These are the incident reports from the police, Alana said, sliding papers across the table. And the hospital discharge papers. Ms. Martinez nodded, her face professionally composed. We'll also need photographs of your injuries for documentation. Alana's hand went instinctively to the bruise on her cheekbone. She glanced at Nia, who was absorbed in her coloring. It's okay, Rusty said quietly. I can take her for a walk if you need a minute. No, Alana replied. She needs to see I'm not hiding. That's what got us here. She turned to Ms. Martinez. We can do it now. The camera flashed several times, documenting the bruising on Alana's face, arms, and ribs. Each click made Rusty's jaw tighten, but he remained silent, watching Nia's crayon move steadily across her paper. Form after form appeared before Alana. Emergency contact information, detailed accounts of the incident, description of threats made, prior instances of violence. Her hand trembled slightly as she worked through each page. Does he know where you're staying? Ms. Martinez asked. Alana looked up at Rusty, uncertainty crossing her face. He doesn't know my address, Rusty answered, and my place isn't in my real name. At their surprised looks, he added, Club precaution, property's in a trust. Ms. Martinez nodded, making a note. That's actually helpful in this situation. An hour passed, then another. Nia grew restless, crawling onto Rusty's lap with her coloring book. Without thinking, he helped her hold the page flat while she worked on a picture of a butterfly. Alana glanced over, a look of surprise softening into something warmer. Finally, Ms. Martinez gathered the completed paperwork. The judge will review this today. I've marked it urgent, so the temporary order should be in place by evening. What happens when he gets out? Alana asked, her voice smaller than before. He'll be served with the order before release. Violation means immediate arrest. Ms. Martinez squeezed Alana's hand. You did the right thing coming in today. As they left the office, Nia tugged on Rusty's jacket. You promised ice cream, she whispered, looking up with serious eyes. Rusty nodded solemnly. I sure did. Outside, the late afternoon sun had broken through the clouds. A small ice cream cart stood at the edge of the courthouse plaza, colorful umbrellas flapping in the breeze. 3 cones, please. Rusty told the vendor. "Chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry," Nia announced, bouncing on her toes. They sat on a bench, the courthouse at their backs. Nia's face was soon sticky with pink ice cream. Her worries temporarily melted away. Alana licked her vanilla cone slowly, watching her daughter. "He kept his promise," Nia said matter-of-factly, pointing at Rusty with her cone. Alana smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes for the first time that day. "Yes, he did." Rusty ducked his head, oddly touched by their simple acknowledgement. "Some promises are easy to keep," he said quietly. The three of them sat together, ice cream dripping onto their fingers, the afternoon sun warm on their faces. A small moment of sweetness after a day of necessary pain. The sun had begun its descent as they arrived back at Rusty's house, the day's paperwork tucked safely in Alana's purse. Rusty unlocked the door and stepped aside, letting Alana and Nia enter first, a small gesture that had become natural over their brief time together. "I'll make dinner," Alana offered, setting her bag on the kitchen counter. "It's the least I can do." Rusty nodded. "Fridge is stocked now. Help yourself." Nia climbed onto a kitchen chair, her stuffed rabbit propped beside her. The ice cream had lifted her spirits, and she hummed softly while coloring a new picture. For a moment, the kitchen felt almost normal, warm and ordinary, as if they'd known each other for years instead of days. The phone's harsh ring cut through the quiet. Rusty checked the caller ID and frowned. "Need to take this," he said, stepping into the hallway. Alana watched him go, her hands pausing over the vegetables she'd been washing. Something in his expression made her stomach tighten. "Detective Rivera," Rusty answered, his voice low but audible. "You got news?" Alana couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but she saw Rusty's shoulders stiffen, his free hand clenching into a fist before deliberately relaxing. He nodded several times, asking short, direct questions. When he returned to the kitchen, his face was carefully neutral, but Alana knew immediately. "He's getting out, isn't he?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Rusty glanced at Nia, who had stopped coloring and was watching them with wide, worried eyes. "Not for certain," he said quietly. "Rivera says the hearing's tomorrow. Depends on the judge, but there's a chance." The knife Alana had been holding clattered to the cutting board. "How? He was—" She stopped herself, aware of Nia's attention. "First offense on paper," Rusty explained. "And a decent lawyer. The protective order will be in place, but paper doesn't stop people," Alana finished, wrapping her arms around herself. Nia slid off her chair and pressed against her mother's side. "Is the bad man coming back?" she asked, her small voice trembling. Alana knelt down, meeting her daughter's eyes. "No, baby. We're safe here." "Your mama's right," Rusty said firmly, crouching down to Nia's level. "This is a safe place, and fear is exactly what people like him count on. We're not giving him that power." He looked up at Alana, his gaze steady. "The protective order means something, and he knows I'm watching now." Alana nodded, though her hands still trembled. Nia remained pressed against her side, tension visible in her tiny shoulders. Rusty studied them both for a moment, then made a decision. "Nia," he said, "you ever helped fix a motorcycle before?" She shook her head, curiosity momentarily overriding her fear. "Well, I could use a helper in the garage. Dinner can wait a bit, if that's okay with your mom." Alana hesitated, then nodded. That would be good. She needed a moment alone to collect herself, and Nia needed distraction from the worry that had crept back into her eyes. The garage was Rusty's sanctuary, tools arranged with precision, the smell of oil and metal, his Harley gleaming under the overhead lights. He pulled a small stool beside the workbench for Nia. "First rule of the garage," he told her solemnly, "is that helpers get to wear special gear." He handed her a clean shop rag to tuck into her collar like a bandana, making her giggle. "Now," he continued. A good mechanic always has someone to hand them tools. You think you can do that job? Nia nodded eagerly. Rusty pointed to the socket wrenches. When I ask for the small one, you hand me that. The big one is for bigger bolts. For the next half hour, Rusty worked on his bike, asking Nia to pass him tools he could easily have reached himself. He explained each part in simple terms, showed her how the engine worked using gestures, rather than complicated words. The garage, once his place of solitude, transformed into something warmer as Nia's questions and laughter filled the space. Through the doorway, Alana watched them, her fear not gone, but somehow more manageable. There was something powerful in seeing Nia comfortable in this unlikely sanctuary. Later, after a simple dinner, and after Nia had fallen asleep in the spare room, Rusty and Alana sat at the kitchen table, coffee mugs between them. If he makes bail, Alana began, her voice stronger than before. What happens then? Rusty met her eyes directly. If Derek comes anywhere near you or Nia, I call the police. Immediately. Not handle it yourself. The question wasn't accusatory, just honest. No. Rusty's answer was firm. That's what the law is for. I've spent enough years on the wrong side of it to know better now. He rubbed his thumb along the rim of his mug. I won't lie to you. There was a time when I would have handled it differently. But that path doesn't lead anywhere good for any of us, especially Nia. Alana studied him, searching his face for any hint of uncertainty. She found none. I believe you, she said simply. In those 3 words lay more trust than either of them had expected to find in such circumstances. Rain drummed against the windows, creating a soothing rhythm that filled the small kitchen. Rusty stood at the stove, spatula in hand, his brow furrowed in concentration as he flipped another misshapen pancake onto a growing stack. Unlike his mechanical skills, his cooking talents were clearly limited. This one looks like a turtle, Nia giggled, pointing at the oddly formed pancake Rusty had just placed on her plate. Does it? Rusty tilted his head, studying the lopsided breakfast creation. I was aiming for a circle. Circles are boring, Nia declared, drowning the turtle-shaped pancake in maple syrup. I like turtles better. Alana watched them from her seat at the table, coffee mug warming her hands. Something had shifted in the last few days. A fragile comfort had taken root in this unexpected sanctuary. The kitchen no longer felt like a stranger's home, but like a temporary haven where they could breathe. These are actually pretty good, Alana said, taking a bite of her own pancake. Lopsided, but good. Told you, Nia said triumphantly through a mouthful. Rusty sat down with his own plate, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. My mom used to make pancakes on rainy days. Never could get them round either. The mention of his mother, this small personal detail, hung in the air between them. Thank you, Alana said suddenly, setting down her fork. Not just for breakfast. For everything. Rusty looked uncomfortable with the gratitude. He shrugged one shoulder. Anyone would have done the same. No, Alana shook her head firmly. They wouldn't have. Most people would have hung up, or called the police and walked away. They wouldn't have opened their home to strangers. Rusty stared at his coffee, turning the mug slowly between his calloused hands. The rain intensified outside, beating a steady tattoo against the roof. I've been wanting to tell you something, he said finally, about why I couldn't walk away. Nia was absorbed in creating syrup patterns on her plate, only half listening to the adults' conversation. There was a morning, Rusty began, his voice low and even. About 7 years back. I'd hit bottom, lost a fight I shouldn't have started, got thrown out of the club for a while, had nothing but what I was wearing. He paused, remembering. I ended up behind a diner off Highway 16. Cold rain. Just like today. I was soaked through, hungover, face beaten so bad I could barely see. Thought that might be it for me, you know. Just another biker who couldn't outrun his demons. Alana's expression shifted as something tugged at her memory. This waitress came out the back door, young, carrying trash to the dumpster. She saw me sitting there in the rain and went back inside. I figured she was calling the cops. Rusty's gaze lifted to meet Alana's. Instead, she came back with a coffee, a wrapped breakfast sandwich, and $15. Said it was bus fare to wherever I needed to go. Didn't ask questions, didn't look scared, just said, "Everyone needs help sometimes." Alana's hand went to her throat, her eyes widening. "Highway 16 Diner," she whispered, "behind the kitchen, near the delivery entrance." Rusty nodded. "That was you." The kitchen grew quiet, except for the sound of rain and Nia's fork scraping against her plate. "I don't even remember what you looked like then," Alana said softly. "I just saw someone who needed help. You were the first person in years who looked at me and saw a human being instead of a threat," Rusty said. "That morning changed things. I used that bus fare to get to my old sponsor's place. Started putting myself back together." Alana reached across the table, her fingers lightly touching his wrist. "I had no idea." "How could you? Just another day for you, probably." "I remember now," Alana said. "Bernice scolded me for being late on my shift." Nia looked up from her plate, syrup on her chin, her eyes moving between them. "What happened?" Alana smiled at her daughter. "A long time ago, before you were born, I met Rusty. He needed help, and I gave him some food and coffee." Nia's face brightened with understanding. "Like how he helped us when I called him?" "Yes, baby," Alana said. "Exactly like that." Nia considered this revelation, her young mind connecting the dots in the straightforward way that only children can. She nodded decisively, as if confirming something she'd suspected all along. "Mommy saved Rusty, and Rusty saved us," she announced simply. Rusty's eyes met Alana's across the table, the truth of Nia's words hanging between them, a perfect circle of kindness that had taken years to complete. The midday sun broke through the rain clouds, leaving the air fresh and the grass glistening with droplets. Rusty watched from a park bench as Nia raced toward the playground, her small shoes splashing through puddles without hesitation. "Be careful on the wet slides," Alana called after her, but Nia was already climbing the metal ladder, her face bright with excitement. Rusty sat with his hands resting on his knees, feeling oddly out of place among the scattered families. His leather cut and tattoos stood in stark contrast to the suburban parents in windbreakers and jeans. A few mothers gathered their children closer when they noticed him, their smiles fading. "She needed this," Alana said softly beside him. "Something normal." Rusty nodded. Kids bounce back fast. It's good to see her laugh. Nia had found another little girl near the swings, and they were taking turns pushing each other higher and higher. Her delighted squeals carried across the playground. "Push me, Rusty," Nia called, waving frantically. He hesitated, glancing at Alana for permission. "Go ahead," she smiled. "She's been waiting for you to offer." Rusty walked over to the swings, conscious of the eyes following him. He positioned himself behind Nia's swing, his large hands gentle as he pulled the chain back. "Ready?" he asked. "Super high," Nia commanded, gripping the chains tightly. Rusty gave a careful push, then another, finding the rhythm. Soon, Nia was flying through the air, her laughter bubbling up pure and infectious. The other parents relaxed slightly, seeing the gentleness in his movements. After the swings, they built a lopsided sandcastle, and Rusty showed Nia how to make a moat that actually held water. Time slipped by without the weight that had pressed down on them for days. "Bernice mentioned a community lunch at the church on Oak Street," Alana said, checking her watch. "She said they welcome everyone." Rusty's expression clouded. "Churches aren't usually my scene." "Mine either," Alana admitted. "But Bernice says the food is good, and they don't push religion on you." Nia tugged at Rusty's hand. "I'm hungry. Can we go?" He couldn't refuse her hopeful expression. All right, just for lunch. The parish hall was warm and filled with the aroma of homemade food. Folding tables lined the room, covered in checkered cloths and simple flower arrangements. Families, elderly couples, and single people filled the seats, creating a comfortable buzz of conversation. Rusty paused in the doorway, bracing for the usual reaction. The stares, the whispers, the subtle shifting away. Instead, an older man with a veteran's cap approached them, his hand extended. "Welcome, folks. I'm Jim. First time here?" Rusty nodded stiffly, shaking the man's hand. "Well, grab some plates and join us. Pastor David makes a mean chili, but watch out for the cornbread. Dry as the Sahara." Jim winked at Nia, who giggled. They filled their plates and found seats at the end of a table. To Rusty's surprise, two older men soon joined them, one with a cane, the other wearing a Vietnam veteran shirt. "That's quite a Harley you've got out there," the man with the cane said. "Panhead?" Rusty looked up, surprised. "Yeah, 57. You ride?" "Back in the day, had a Sportster until my hip gave out." The man introduced himself as Frank. "This here's Bobby. Did 2 tours in Vietnam." Bobby nodded at Rusty. "Noticed your cut. My brother was with the Angels in Oakland, back in the 70s. The conversation flowed easier than Rusty expected. These men judged him not by his appearance, but by the respect in his voice, the way he helped Nia cut her chicken, the gentle attention he paid to Alana. A young pastor stopped by their table, introducing himself without pushing leaflets or invitations. He thanked them for coming and made a point of telling Nia how beautiful her braids looked. For the first time in years, Rusty felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Possibility. Not belonging. Not yet, but the hint that it might exist somewhere. He watched Alana laughing with a group of women while Nia colored pictures with other children. Maybe there was a life beyond his past, beyond the club, beyond the reputation that both protected and isolated him. As they drove home, Nia dozed in the back seat, exhausted from play. Alana gazed out the window, her face more peaceful than he'd seen it. "That wasn't so bad," Rusty admitted. "No," Alana agreed. "It wasn't." They needed gas, so Rusty pulled into a station on the edge of town. Alana stayed in the truck with sleeping Nia while he went to pay. The moment Rusty stepped out of the store, he saw him. Derek leaning against the side of the building, his face tight with fury. He must have been watching, waiting. "Well, well, playing family man now?" Derek's voice was low, dangerous. Rusty stopped, keeping his distance. "Walk away, Derek. You're violating the order just being here." Derek spat on the ground. "Like you care about the law. You've got some nerve, Rusty. 20 years you disappear, then suddenly you're Captain Save-A-Ho for some random woman?" "That's enough," Rusty warned, his hands curling into fists. "You left me with him," Derek hissed, stepping closer. "Left me with Dad's fists, while you rode off with your precious club. Now, you want to play hero for strangers?" The words hit Rusty like physical blows. Old guilt surged through him. "You've got no right," Derek continued, his voice rising. "No right to help them, when you couldn't even help your own blood." Rusty stood frozen, aware of Alana watching from the truck, of Nia sleeping peacefully, unaware. "I'm sorry about the past," Rusty said quietly. "But these people are innocent. Leave them alone." Derek's face contorted. He stepped forward and spat, not on the ground this time, but directly at Rusty's chest. "You're no hero. You're just trying to wash the blood off your hands." Rusty's every instinct screamed to strike, to silence the truth in Derek's words with violence. Instead, he stood still, the spit staining his shirt, his brother's hatred burning between them. "Get in your car and go," Rusty said, his voice deadly calm. "Next time, I call the cops." Derek sneered, but backed away toward a beat-up sedan. "This isn't over." As Derek drove away, Rusty remained rooted to the spot, his brother's accusations echoing in his head. The fragile peace of the day shattered. The truck rumbled down the highway, windshield wipers beating against a light drizzle that had started falling. Inside, the silence was heavy enough to touch. Rusty gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had gone white. In the rearview mirror, he could see Nia had fallen back asleep, her head resting against the window, exhausted from the playground and the church lunch. Alana stared straight ahead, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She'd witnessed enough of the confrontation to know something was terribly wrong. The peaceful feeling from earlier had evaporated, leaving behind a tension that filled every corner of the truck. "Who was he to you, really?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Rusty swallowed hard. "Told you. My brother." "That's not what I'm asking," Alana said. "What did he mean when he said you left him?" Rain pelted harder against the windshield. Rusty checked the mirror again to make sure Nia was still sleeping. "It's ugly," he said. "You don't need to hear it." "I think I do." Alana turned to face him. "We're staying in your house. My daughter trusts you. I need to understand." Rusty drove in silence for another mile before pulling into an empty church parking lot. He turned off the engine but left the key in the ignition so the heater would keep running. "My old man," he began, staring out at the rain. "He was mean when he drank. Mean when he was sober too, but worse with whiskey in him. Mom left when I was 14. Derek was 9. Alana waited, giving him space to continue. "By 16, I was running with the Angels. It was a way out, a family that didn't beat the hell out of me." His jaw tightened. Derek was still at home, taking it all. I'd come by sometimes, try to step between them, but... He shook his head. "I was just a kid myself." "You couldn't have taken him with you," Alana said softly. "Maybe not, but I could have tried harder." Rusty's voice grew rough. "Then one night, Dad put Derek in the hospital, broke 3 ribs, his arm. I went crazy. Beat my old man so bad they weren't sure he'd live." The rain drummed steadily on the roof of the truck. "I couldn't face Derek after that. I just took off. Rode out west with the club for 2 years. By the time I came back, Derek was in trouble. Drugs, fighting. I tried to help, but he wouldn't hear it. Said I'd abandoned him when he needed me most." Rusty's hands fell from the wheel to his lap. He was right. "You were a child yourself," Alana said. "Living in survival mode. Doesn't matter. I left him there." Rusty's voice was flat. "Now look at him. Look what he became." "Derek made his own choices," Alana insisted. "Just like you did." "Did I?" Rusty's laugh was bitter. "Or did I just trade one kind of violence for another?" He started the engine again and pulled back onto the road. The rest of the drive passed in silence, but something had changed. The guilt that Rusty had carried for decades had surfaced, raw and bleeding. When they arrived home, Rusty carried sleeping Nia inside and placed her gently on the couch. Alana covered her with a blanket and kissed her forehead. "I'll make some dinner," Alana offered once they were in the kitchen. "It's the least I can do." Rusty shook his head. "I need to work on some parts. Got a bike waiting at the shop." The lie tasted sour in his mouth. "Rusty," Alana began, but he was already moving toward the door. "I'll be in the garage if you need anything." The garage was cold and quiet, a refuge of tools and grease and simple problems that could be fixed with the right wrench. Rusty sat heavily on his workbench stool, head in his hands. The confrontation with Derek had ripped open old wounds he thought had scarred over long ago. What right did he have to help Alana and Nia? What made him think he could protect them when he'd failed his own brother? Derek's words echoed in his mind. "You're no hero. You're just trying to wash the blood off your hands." Time passed. The light outside faded. Rusty barely noticed, lost in memories of mistakes and regrets. A soft knock on the garage door startled him. He looked up, expecting Alana, but no one was there. When he glanced down, He saw a piece of paper had been slid under the door. He picked it up. It was a child's drawing, done in bright crayon. 3 stick figures stood holding hands. A tall one, with what looked like a leather vest. A medium-sized one with curly hair, and a small one wearing pink. Above them was a lopsided sun, and written in large, uneven letters, "Rusty, Mommy Me." From the doorway connecting the garage to the house, Rusty could see the kitchen table. Alana had set 3 places for dinner. Nia's drawing marked his empty spot. He stood in the doorway, unable to step inside, the colorful drawing trembling slightly in his hand. He didn't deserve this. Their trust, their inclusion, the simple gift of a child's artwork. The garage was where he belonged, cold, isolated, surrounded by broken things. Morning sunlight filtered through the dusty garage window, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. Rusty blinked awake, his back stiff from a night spent on the old army cot he kept for late repair jobs. He hadn't meant to sleep there all night, but after staring at Nia's drawing for what felt like hours, he couldn't bring himself to go inside. The sound of cabinets opening in the kitchen told him Alana and Nia were already awake. He sat up slowly, rubbing his face with calloused hands. His leather cut hung from a hook nearby, the patches and worn edges a reminder of the life he'd lived. A life that had no place for family breakfasts and children's drawings on refrigerators. When he finally entered the kitchen, Nia looked up from her cereal bowl, her face brightening. "Rusty, I saved you the rainbow loops." She pointed to a bowl waiting at his usual spot. "Thanks, kid," he said. But instead of sitting down, he poured himself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter. "I need to make some calls. You two need a ride to school soon?" Alana studied his face, noting the circles under his eyes and the careful distance he kept. "Yes," she said quietly. "That would be helpful." The drive to Nia's school was nothing like their previous trips, where there had been easy conversation and even laughter. Now there was only the radio playing softly, and Rusty's occasional short answers to Nia's questions. He kept his eyes on the road, his posture rigid. "Will you come walk me to the door again?" Nia asked when they pulled up to the school. "Better if your mom does it today," Rusty said, not meeting her eyes in the rearview mirror. Nia's small shoulders slumped. "But Mrs. Green said she wanted to show you my picture on the wall." "Maybe another time," he said, his voice neutral and flat. Alana watched her daughter's face fall and felt something crack inside her chest. She squeezed Nia's hand as they walked toward the school building, trying to explain away Rusty's behavior with stories about grown-ups being tired sometimes. When she returned to the truck, Alana slid into the passenger seat and stared straight ahead. "Where to?" Rusty asked, as if she were just any passenger. "The Community Resource Center on Pine," she said. "I need to talk to them about options." Rusty nodded once, understanding immediately. She was making plans to leave. At the center, a kind-faced woman named Ms. Paulson walked Alana through the available programs. Temporary housing, job placement assistance, childcare subsidies. Alana took notes with trembling hands, each bullet point another step away from Rusty's house, from the brief safety they'd found. "The shelter apartment would be available next week," Ms. Paulson explained. "It's small but clean. You and your daughter would have your own bathroom, and there's 24-hour security." Alana nodded, trying to feel grateful instead of hollow. "That sounds good. Is there somewhere safe you can stay until then?" Alana hesitated. "Yes, for now." When Rusty picked her up an hour later, she had a folder full of pamphlets and forms clutched to her chest. He didn't ask about them, and she didn't volunteer any information. The silence between them felt like a wall growing higher by the minute. They picked up Nia from school and drove home. Throughout the afternoon, Rusty kept himself busy with tasks that took him away from the house. Checking the mail, fixing a loose gutter, changing the oil in his truck. Each time he returned, he'd ask if they needed anything. His words polite, but distant. After dinner, Alana read to Naya in the spare bedroom, but the little girl kept glancing toward the door. "Is Rusty going to come say goodnight?" she asked. "He makes the bear voices better than you do." "I don't think so, sweetie," Alana said, smoothing Nia's curls. "He's very busy tonight." "Can I stay up a little longer? Just in case." Alana couldn't refuse the hope in her daughter's eyes. "Just a little bit." 9 o'clock came and went. Then 9:30. Nia's eyelids grew heavy, but each time they would start to close, she'd jerk herself awake and look toward the hallway. "Maybe he forgot," she whispered, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Maybe if I wait just a little more?" 10 o'clock arrived. The house was quiet except for the occasional sound of tools from the garage. Alana gently tucked the blanket around Nia's shoulders. "Time for sleep, baby." Nia's lower lip trembled. "He's not coming, is he?" "I don't think so. Not tonight." Nia turned her face into the pillow, her small body curling inward. When she looked up again, her eyes were wet with tears. "Is Rusty leaving like the others?" she whispered. The kitchen filled with soft morning light as Nia hunched over a blank sheet of paper at the table. Her little fingers gripped a yellow crayon tightly. She had woken before everyone else, padding barefoot to the kitchen when the sun was just beginning to peek through the windows. Her tongue poked out slightly as she concentrated, adding careful strokes to her drawing. First came a small figure huddled in a dark space, a closet, with teardrops on her face. Next to it she drew another figure with long hair and more tears. Then, taking up most of the page, she drew a motorcycle with a big man on it. After a moment's thought, she picked up the brightest yellow crayon and drew a perfect circle above the motorcycle rider's helmet. "Because helpers get halos," she whispered to herself, the words her grandmother had taught her when they looked at picture books about angels. She didn't hear Rusty enter the kitchen until his boots scuffed against the linoleum. He stood frozen in the doorway, hair uncombed and eyes shadowed from another night of poor sleep. "I made you another picture," Nia said without looking up. "It's from when I was scared." Rusty stepped closer, looking down at the crayon drawing. His throat tightened as he recognized himself as the figure with the bright halo. A hero in a child's eyes, not the broken man he knew himself to be. "That's—" his voice caught. "That's real good, kid." Nia pointed to the yellow circle. "Nana May says people who help others get special lights around them. I couldn't remember what it's called." "A halo," Rusty said softly. "It's called a halo." "Yeah, that's it." She smiled up at him, innocent and trusting. "You got one because you saved us." Rusty turned away quickly, busying himself with making coffee. The drawing had hit him harder than any punch ever could. He folded the paper carefully and slipped it into his jacket pocket, unable to look at it anymore, but unwilling to leave it behind. Later that morning, after dropping Nia off at school, Alana was asked to speak privately with Mrs. Green while Rusty waited in the truck. "Mrs. Johnson," the kindergarten teacher began gently, "I wanted to check in about Nia. She was doing better for a few days, but now she's become withdrawn again." Alana nodded, unsurprised but saddened. "We've had a complicated week." "Children are remarkably sensitive to emotional withdrawal," Mrs. Green continued. "Sometimes even more than to outright conflict. They feel the absence of connection very deeply." "I know," Alana whispered. Yesterday, during sharing time, she talked about her friend Rusty and how he makes her feel safe. Then she got very quiet and wouldn't say more. Mrs. Green's eyes were kind, but concerned. "Whatever's happening, just remember that children often can't articulate their feelings. They show them in their behavior instead." When Alana returned to the truck, she relayed the conversation to Rusty in measured tones. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, eyes fixed straight ahead. "She said Nia's become quiet again," Alana finished, "like before." Rusty swallowed hard. His attempt to protect them by pulling away was doing exactly the opposite. The weight of it settled on his shoulders like a physical burden. The day grew heavier when Alana's phone rang that afternoon. The victim advocate's voice was professional, but compassionate, as she explained that the first major court hearing was scheduled for tomorrow morning at 9. "They'll establish formal charges and review the restraining order," she explained. "Your presence would be helpful, but not absolutely required at this stage." Alana's hand trembled as she set down the phone. "Tomorrow," she said. "It's all happening tomorrow." That night, after a stilted dinner where Rusty made efforts to speak more, but still maintained his emotional distance, Alana put Nia to bed. The little girl asked once more if Rusty would read to her, and once more Alana had to make excuses. Long after both Alana and Nia had fallen asleep, Rusty sat alone in his darkened living room. The house creaked around him in the night silence. He pulled out his phone, scrolling mindlessly until he noticed a saved voicemail from the night of the call, one he didn't remember saving. He pressed play, holding the phone to his ear. There was rustling, then Nia's tiny voice. "Thank you for staying," she whispered. The words were followed by the sound of her breathing, then silence. Rusty's hands shook. He played it again, then a third time. "Thank you for staying." Something broke inside him then. A dam he'd built years ago. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and pressed his palms against his eyes. His shoulders heaved once, twice, and then the tears came. Silent at first, then with deep, ragged breaths that he couldn't control. The phone slipped from his fingers onto the carpet as Rusty Callahan, feared Hell's Angel, finally broke down and wept in the darkness of his living room. Before the sun even thought about rising, Rusty sat at his kitchen table, steam rising from a fresh cup of coffee between his calloused hands. His eyes were red-rimmed from the night before, but something had cleared in them, like a storm finally passed, leaving everything washed clean. The kitchen clock ticked steadily in the darkness. 4:32 in the morning. Hours before anyone needed to be awake for court. Rusty took a long sip of coffee, the bitter taste grounding him. Last night's breakdown had scraped something raw inside him, but it had also cleared away layers of hardened defenses. The truth sat before him now, undeniable in its simplicity. He wasn't pulling away to protect Alana and Nia. He was pulling away to protect himself. Violence, pain, even prison. These were things he'd faced without flinching. But the trust in a child's eyes, and the quiet strength of a woman who'd seen the worst and still stood tall. That terrified him more than any threat he'd ever faced. Loving people meant you could fail them. Rusty ran his thumb over a small scar on his hand, remembering the knife fight that gave it to him. Physical scars were easy. They healed. They faded. They became stories. But the scars he'd left on Derek by walking away, those were the kind that festered and spread. The floor creaked softly, and he looked up to see Alana entering the kitchen, already dressed in her best clothes for court. She paused when she saw him, clearly surprised to find him there. "You're up early," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Made coffee," Rusty replied, gesturing to the pot. "It's fresh." Alana poured herself a cup, then hesitated before sitting across from him. The kitchen light cast shadows across her face, highlighting the fading bruises around her eye. She looked like a woman prepared to face the world alone if necessary. "Alana," Rusty began, his voice gruff but steady. "I'm sorry." She looked up, surprise flickering across her face. "I've been pushing away. Not because of you or Nia. Because of me." He set his mug down and forced himself to meet her eyes. "I can't fix what I did wrong with Derek. I can't go back and be the brother he needed. That guilt. It's easier than letting myself care about what happens now." Alana watched him carefully, not rushing to offer comfort or absolution. "I realized something last night," Rusty continued. "I can't repair everything I failed to do in the past, but I can choose what I do now. Today, tomorrow." He took a deep breath. "If you'll still have me around." Alana's fingers tightened around her mug. Are you going to stand with us today? In court? Facing Derek? The question was direct, a test with no room for half measures. Yes, Rusty said without hesitation. Every step. A small sound from the hallway made them both turn. Nia stood there in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes, her stuffed rabbit dangling from one hand. Morning, baby, Alana said softly. It's still early. You can sleep more if you want. Nia ignored her mother, walking straight to Rusty instead. She looked up at him with eyes that seemed to see right through him. Are you going away? She asked, her voice small but direct. Rusty shifted in his chair, then lowered himself to one knee, so he was at her eye level. No, I'm not, he said, the words coming easier than he expected. I'm staying, right here. Nia studied his face with the serious concentration only a child can manage. Promise? I promise. She shook her head, unimpressed. You have to do it right. Cross your heart. Despite everything, a smile tugged at the corner of Rusty's mouth. He drew an X over his chest with one finger. Cross my heart, he said solemnly. Nia nodded, satisfied with this proper oath. Good, she declared, because I need you to come to court with us today. Mom says there will be a judge, and he has to hear about the bad night. I'll be there, Rusty promised again. Both of you. You won't have to do it alone. 3 hours later, the courthouse loomed before them, grand and imposing with its stone steps and tall columns. Rusty had changed into his cleanest jeans and a button-up shirt. No cut, no patches, nothing to mark him as an outlaw. Just a man standing beside a family that needed him. Nia looked up at the building, her eyes wide. It's big, she whispered. Big buildings aren't so scary once you're inside them, Rusty told her. And we'll be together the whole time. Nia reached up and took his hand. Then she took her mother's hand with her other one, connecting them all together in a chain. Rusty looked over at Alana, a question in his eyes. She nodded once, a small gesture that carried the weight of renewed trust. Together, the three of them climbed the courthouse steps, hand in hand, facing whatever waited inside as a unit. The courthouse hallway buzzed with quiet tension as Alana sat on a hard wooden bench, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Rusty stood nearby, his back against the wall, watching everyone who walked past with careful eyes. He'd exchanged his leather for a button-down shirt and clean jeans, but his vigilance remained unchanged. Ms. Johnson? A court officer appeared at the end of the hall. They're ready for you now. Alana stood, smoothing her blouse nervously. Before walking toward the courtroom doors, she knelt in front of Nia, who clutched her rabbit close to her chest. Remember what we talked about? Alana asked gently. You're going to stay in the special room with Ms. Paula, while Mommy talks to the judge. And Rusty will be with you? Nia asked. Yes, Rusty will be right there with me. Alana kissed her daughter's forehead. I'll come get you when we're done. A kind-faced woman from Child Services approached, holding out her hand to Nia. We have books and puzzles in our room. Would you like to see? Nia looked up at Rusty, who nodded encouragingly. It's okay, baby girl. Your mom and I will be back soon. As the Child Services worker led Nia away, Rusty turned to Alana. Ready? She took a deep breath. As I'll ever be. Inside the courtroom, the polished wood and formal atmosphere felt suffocating. Derek sat at the defense table with a public defender beside him. When he saw Alana enter with Rusty, his face darkened with hatred. The judge, a stern-faced woman with silver hair, called the court to order. The proceedings began with clinical efficiency, case numbers, charges read, procedural matters addressed. When Alana was called to testify, her voice trembled at first, but grew stronger with each question from the prosecutor. She described the night of the attack in measured words that couldn't hide the horror beneath them. And where was your daughter during this time? The prosecutor asked. Hiding in her closet, Alana said, her voice catching. She was so scared she called for help. The prosecutor displayed photographs of Alana's injuries on a screen. The bruised ribs, the split lip, the marks around her throat. The images were stark under the courtroom lights, making several people in the gallery shift uncomfortably. Derek stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched tight, refusing to look at the evidence of what he'd done. When Rusty was called, he walked to the witness stand with measured steps. He kept his answers direct and factual when questioned about receiving Nia's call and his actions that night. "Why did you stay on the line with the child?" the prosecutor asked. "Because she was terrified," Rusty replied simply, "and no child should have to face that alone." "And you called the authorities rather than intervening personally?" "Yes." Rusty's eyes flickered briefly toward Derek. "I wanted to make sure everything was done by the law." Derek's attorney tried to suggest Rusty had old scores to settle with his brother, but Rusty's calm demeanor never wavered. "This wasn't about him or me," Rusty stated firmly. "It was about a 5-year-old girl hiding in a closet while her mother was being hurt." The judge asked several pointed questions herself, her eyes moving between the evidence photos and Derek's scowling face. When all testimony concluded, she spoke with clear authority. "Based on the evidence presented, I am granting the protective order." She looked directly at Derek. "Mr. Callahan, you are to remain at least 500 feet from Ms. Johnson and her daughter at all times. No contact whatsoever, not in person, not by phone, not through third parties. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest." She continued with additional conditions: mandatory counseling, substance abuse evaluation, and court dates for the criminal charges still pending. Derek's face grew darker with each requirement imposed. "Do you understand these conditions, Mr. Callahan?" the judge asked sharply. "Yes, Your Honor," Derek muttered, not meeting her eyes. When the gavel finally came down, Alana let out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The immediate danger wasn't over, but they had won this crucial first step. Outside in the hallway, the adrenaline that had carried her through her testimony suddenly drained away. Alana's knees buckled, and she might have fallen if Rusty hadn't caught her arm. "Whoa, steady there," he said quietly. "You did it. It's over for today." "Mommy!" Nia's voice rang out as she ran down the hallway from the child services room, her rabbit bouncing in her hand. "Mommy, did you win? Did you tell the judge about the bad night?" Alana painfully lowered herself to one knee, opening her arms as Nia crashed into them. She winced at the pressure against her still-healing ribs, but held her daughter close. "Yes, baby," she whispered, tears finally breaking free. "We did. We won." That same afternoon, Rusty drove back toward his house after dropping Alana and Nia off. The courtroom victory had lifted some weight from their shoulders, but a heavier burden still pressed on his own. Instead of turning onto his street, he continued straight, following the signs to county detention. The county jail was a blocky concrete building with narrow windows and razor wire glinting in the afternoon sun. Rusty parked his truck and sat for several minutes, his hands still gripping the steering wheel. He'd avoided this confrontation for years, decades really. Part of him wanted to start the engine again and drive away. But that would be the old Rusty, the one who ran from hard truths. Inside, he went through security with practiced patience. The guards eyed his tattoos with suspicion, but processed him without comment. The visiting room smelled of industrial cleaner and too many bodies in too small a space. Families clustered around tables in the open visitation area, but Rusty was directed to a row of booths with glass partitions for higher security inmates. He settled onto the hard plastic seat and waited, tapping his fingers against his knee. When Derek finally appeared on the other side of the glass, he looked worse than he had in court, his eyes sunken, orange jumpsuit hanging loose on his frame. For a split second, Rusty saw the shadow of the boy he'd once been. Derek's surprise quickly hardened into a sneer as he dropped into the chair. He picked up the phone receiver and waited for Rusty to do the same. "Well, look who showed up," Derek said, his voice scratchy through the line. "Saint Rusty. Come to gloat?" "No," Rusty answered simply. "Then what? Brotherly love. Little late for that, isn't it?" Derek's laugh was sharp and empty. "Or did you come to lecture me about how I should have been more like you?" Rusty shook his head. "We both know that would be bullshit. I wasn't exactly a role model. At least you got that right." Derek leaned forward, pressing a hand against the glass. "You left me with him. You knew what he was like, and you just took off." The accusation hung between them, raw and true. Rusty didn't deny it. "Yes, I did." He met Derek's gaze steadily. "I failed you. I was 22, scared, and selfish. I convinced myself you'd be okay because I couldn't handle staying." Derek blinked, clearly thrown by the admission. He recovered quickly. "So what? You want forgiveness?" He spat the word. "You think saying sorry makes up for the last 20 years? "I'm not here for forgiveness," Rusty said. "And I'm not here to rescue you either." "Then why bother?" Derek's face twisted. "Or is it about her? You playing hero for some woman and her brat?" Rusty's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice level. "Their names are Alana and Nia, and yes, they matter to me." "Of course they do," Derek sneered. "They're your chance to feel good about yourself. Your redemption project." "No," Rusty said firmly. "They're people. People you hurt. Just like Dad hurt us." Derek flinched, as if Rusty had struck him. "I came here to tell you the truth," Rusty continued. "I failed you. I should have been there and I wasn't. That's on me." He paused, leaning closer to the glass. "But what you did to Alana and Nia, that's on you. Not Dad. Not me. You." Derek's knuckles whitened around the phone. "You don't know what it's been like for me." "I don't," Rusty agreed. "But I know what it's been like for them. And I need you to understand. I won't let you near them again. If that means testifying against my own brother, I'll do it." A tense silence stretched between them. "So that's it?" Derek finally asked. "You came to wash your hands of me." Rusty shook his head slowly. "No. I also came to tell you I prayed for you last night." Derek barked a surprised laugh. "You? Since when do you pray?" "Since recently." Rusty's mouth quirked in a half-smile. "Not sure I'm doing it right, but I tried. Asked for you to find some peace, some healing." The mockery drained from Derek's face, replaced by confusion and something more vulnerable. "I don't need your prayers," he muttered, but the venom was gone from his voice. "Maybe not. But I needed to offer them." Derek stared at him for a long moment, then abruptly hung up the phone. He stood, signaling to the guard he was finished, and walked away without looking back. Rusty remained seated, the dead receiver still pressed to his ear. He hadn't expected reconciliation. Hadn't even hoped for it, really. But he'd needed to speak the truth, both his failure and Derek's responsibility, out loud. He finally replaced the handset and walked back through security, out into the afternoon sunlight. The air felt cleaner out here, easier to breathe. His shoulders still carried weight, but different now. The burden of truth, rather than denial. For the first time in years, Rusty felt like he could face his past without drowning in it. Early that evening, Rusty pulled into his driveway, the gravel crunching under his truck tires. The afternoon with Derek had drained him, but something else had replaced the heaviness. Not peace exactly, but clarity. He reached for the brown paper bags on the passenger seat before heading inside. The screen door creaked as he pushed it open. He found Alana at the kitchen table helping Nia sort through colored paper for what looked like a school assignment. They both looked up at the sound of his boots on the floor. "Rusty!" Nia's face brightened instantly. "You came back!" The simple faith in her voice made his throat tight. She spoke as if his return was always certain, even when adults knew better. "Course I did," he said, lifting the bags. "And I brought dinner. Fried chicken, cornbread, and—" He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a small, paper-wrapped package. "Orange popsicles for dessert." Nia clapped her hands together. "My favorite!" "I remembered," Rusty said, setting everything on the counter. He caught Alana watching him, her eyes searching his face. He gave her a small nod that said more than words could. "I'm here. Really here." "Let me help," Alana said, rising from the table. As she passed him to grab plates, her hand brushed his arm lightly. Not quite a touch, but an acknowledgement. "Can I set the table?" Nia asked, already sliding from her chair. "I can make it fancy with napkins." "That would be great," Rusty said. "Real fancy dinner tonight." While Alana unpacked the food, Rusty noticed the loose screen door that had been rattling since they arrived. Without comment, he grabbed his toolbox from the garage and fixed it with a few quick adjustments. These small repairs, things within his power to fix, felt right in his hands. By the time he finished, Nia had arranged 3 place settings with careful precision. Paper napkins were folded into triangles, and she'd found a small jar to put some dandelions she'd picked from the yard. "Look, Rusty, I made it beautiful," she announced proudly. "Sure did," he agreed, washing his hands at the sink. "Fanciest table I've seen." They settled around the table, passing chicken and cornbread. The conversation flowed easier than it had in days, centered on simple things. How Nia had answered a question in class, the weather turning warmer, a funny story Alana told about a regular customer at the diner, who always ordered his eggs. Not too hard, not too soft, but just exactly right. When Rusty laughed at the punchline, Alana's own laugh joined his, genuine and unguarded for the first time since he'd known her. The sound filled the kitchen with something he couldn't name, but desperately wanted to keep. After dinner, Nia tugged at Rusty's sleeve. "Will you help with my project? It's about community helpers." "Sure," he said, clearing their plates. "What kind of project?" Nia led him back to her scattered art supplies. "We have to make a poster about people who help others. I already drew a firefighter and a doctor and a teacher." Rusty sat beside her, his large frame dwarfing the kitchen chair. "Sounds like you got all the important ones." "Not all of them," Nia said seriously. She pushed a blank paper toward him. "I need to add you." Rusty stared at her, caught off guard. "Me? I'm not like those other folks, Nia." "Yes, you are," she insisted. "You help people. You helped us when we were scared." Alana, wiping down the counter, paused to watch them. "That's different," Rusty tried to explain. "Those people, that's their job. They train for it. Mrs. Green says community helpers are people who make others feel safe," Nia continued stubbornly. "You make me feel safe." The simple truth of her words silenced any argument he might have made. Instead, he picked up a crayon and helped her draw a figure in a leather jacket standing beside a motorcycle. As they worked on the poster, Rusty felt something settle in his chest, the understanding that family wasn't just blood and birthright. It could be built through choices made day after day, through fixing screen doors and carrying popsicles and helping with homework. The evening stretched on peacefully. Rusty showed Nia how to draw different kinds of motorcycles, while Alana joined them at the table, adding her own touches to the poster. The kitchen grew warm with their presence, filled with the small sounds of crayons on paper and quiet conversation. Eventually, Nia's head began to droop, her small body fighting sleep as she colored one last figure. Her crayon slowed, then stopped, her cheek coming to rest against the table. Without hesitation, Rusty gathered her up, one arm supporting her back, the other under her knees. She nestled against his chest instinctively, her breathing deep and even. He carried her down the hallway to the bedroom, Alana following close behind. The nightlight cast soft shadows as Rusty lowered Nia onto the bed. She didn't stir, as Alana pulled the blanket over her small frame. They stood side by side in the doorway, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest. In the quiet hallway, listening to their daughter breathe in peaceful sleep, something unspoken passed between them. The knowledge that, whatever came next, they would face it together. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, painting warm squares on the table where they sat. For the first time since Naya's desperate call, breakfast wasn't rushed by court appointments or school deadlines. Rusty had made pancakes again, still lopsided but improving, and Nia had arranged banana slices into smiling faces on each one. "These are way better," Nia declared, syrup dripping from her fork. "Practice makes perfect," Rusty said, watching her eat with undisguised affection. Alana sipped her coffee, looking more rested than she had in days. The bruises on her face were fading to yellow, healing just like everything else. When her phone rang, she answered with the caution that had become habit. But as she listened, her expression shifted from wariness to surprise. "Yes, that would work. Thank you," she said, her voice steady. "We can be ready by then." After hanging up, she set the phone down carefully. That was the housing coordinator. They have a transitional apartment opening up next week. 2 bedrooms, subsidized rent for 6 months while I get back on my feet. "Mommy, is that our new home?" Nia asked, looking up from her pancakes. "Yes, baby, our very own place." Rusty nodded, his face giving nothing away. "That's good news. It's in that complex near the park," Alana continued. "The one with the playground Nia liked." An uncomfortable silence settled between the adults. The apartment meant independence, stability, everything Alana needed. But it also meant leaving this unexpected sanctuary they'd found. Nia looked between them, sensing the tension. "Is Rusty coming too?" Alana touched her daughter's hand. "Honey, this is Rusty's house. We'll have our own place now." "But we'll still see him, right?" Nia's voice rose with worry. Rusty cleared his throat. "Course you will." He turned to Alana, his eyes steady. "I can help you move, get settled. I know some people who might have furniture they don't need. And after, I'm around if you want me to be." He didn't ask them to stay. Didn't suggest they needed him. Just offered his help without conditions, giving Alana the dignity of her own choice. "We'd like that," Alana said quietly. Over the next 2 days, life moved forward with practical momentum. Nia returned to her regular school schedule, bringing home artwork that now covered Rusty's refrigerator. Alana worked a full shift at the diner, coming home with tips and a renewed sense of purpose. Meanwhile, Rusty quietly gathered essentials: a small kitchen table from Bernice, chairs from the church donation center, bed frames from a veteran neighbor who was downsizing. On moving day, Rusty's truck was loaded before dawn. The new apartment was modest but bright, with windows facing east and a small balcony. While Alana unpacked kitchen supplies, Rusty assembled Nia's bed, following her specific instructions about where the stuffed animal should sit. "The rabbit goes here," she directed seriously, "so he can see the door." Rusty understood without explanation. The rabbit needed to watch for danger. He made sure it had the perfect view. By afternoon, curtains hung in the windows, the refrigerator hummed steadily, and a small bookshelf stood filled with Nia's favorite stories. The place felt like home, not because of what was in it, but because of who. That evening, they walked together to Nia's school for a spring open house. The hallways were crowded with families admiring displayed artwork. Near Nia's classroom, Mrs. Green greeted them warmly. "And who have you brought with you tonight?" she asked Nia, glancing at Rusty with gentle curiosity. Nia took Rusty's hand without hesitation. "This is Rusty. He's my safe person." The simple declaration hung in the air, more powerful than any complicated explanation could have been. Rusty's eyes glistened briefly before he blinked it away. Later, back at the apartment, Rusty checked the locks one final time. The deadbolt was solid, the windows secure. Everything as it should be. "All set," he said, standing at the door. Alana stood before him, no longer bruised, no longer afraid. "Thank you. For everything." "Anytime," he answered, and they both knew it wasn't just a saying. From her bedroom doorway, Nia called out, "See you tomorrow, Rusty." Rusty looked past Alana to the little girl in her pajamas, the child who had dialed a wrong number and changed 3 lives. "Tomorrow," he promised, and closed the door behind him. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.